this was due to soft launch, as I think the phrase that we used earlier today, of our website, and newly developed website along with the e-streaming project and the handing over of a number of tablets, electronic tablets to members as part of our e-Parliament project. On that note, I'd just like to say that it may be noted by some that the Alliance for Change's members did not receive a tablet, but that was an omission, and that is being rectified even as I speak. Honourable members, also by way of announcements, there are a number, thank you, of them I'd like to make. The first is that excuses have been received and therefore leave have been granted to two honourable members, the Honourable Dr. Barry Ramstrand, Minister of Health, and to the Honourable Member, Mrs. Priya Manichan, from today's sitting. I wish to state as well that over the next few weeks, several members of this House will be representing the Assembly at various conferences abroad, beginning with the Honourable Member Bishop Juan Edgel, who will attend the 25th CPA Annual Parliamentary Seminar in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, from the 25th to the 31st of May. In fact, this afternoon he's going to meet with sometime in June, which is sometime next week. Also, the Honourable Member Mr. Ronald Boltan will represent us at the 11th CPA Canadian Parliamentary Seminar in Ottawa, Canada, from the 1st of June to the 7th. Thank you. And also our Honourable Members, Mrs. Indrani Chandapal and Mrs. Catherine Hughes will represent the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians Special Call Meeting in Nassau, Bahamas, from the 22nd to the 23rd of May. That is next week as well. And members, I have issued a letter of invitation to the female women members of Parliament for us to have a little meeting on Monday so that we can send our two delegates off in fine style. And hopefully it will be the beginning of a process that leads to the formalized meeting or the formation of a women's caucus of the CWP of our Parliament. Third announcement is that by agreement of the Parliamentary Management Committee and the work done by the Government's Chief Whip, Ms. Gil Teixeira, and Lieutenant Colonel retired Mr. Joe Harman, the Parliamentary Management Committee has decided that this Parliament will take up membership in several organizations, the first being Parl-Americas, second, the Interparliamentary Union, the third, the Parliamentary Network of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, and the fourth, the Union of South American Nations, UNISAR. Those, I believe, are the announcements. Who I forgot to mention as well, the delegation is likely to represent the Parliament and the World Summit of Legislators in Mexico, also in June of this year. Members as well would recall that some time ago, some members of the House were invited to pair themselves with members in other parts of the Commonwealth as part of a mentoring program. Some members we know have been paired with other members from CPA countries and are participating. Those members we know to be Lieutenant Colonel Harman, Mr. Joseph Hamilton, Mr. Desmond Hugh Troutman. I must confess that when I saw the name Desmond and Hugh, I thought Mr. Hoyt might was here. And Mrs. Catherine Hughes. So those members are actively involved in the mentoring program. Last announcement is one of a somber note, and some of you may have seen it in the newspapers, that in fact the nation lost, and a member of this House lost a relative. We lost Mr. Basil Rodriguez of Morocco Region 1. And those of you who traveled to Morocco would have been entertained from time to time by Uncle Basil on his little banjo and his Spanish songs. So as we learned of the passing of the honourable member, and I'm told the brother of our own honourable minister, Mrs. Karen Rodriguez Burkett. He was a teacher and he had a fantastic love of music and of people, well respected in his community, and as I said, loved to entertain all. Was a recipient of 2 national awards, the Medal of Service and the Golden Arrow of Achievement. And so on behalf of all of us, we extend to the Honourable Minister and to the family of the Rodriguez family in all of Region 1, and Marook in particular, our sincerest condolences on his passing. Members, this afternoon in our presence, we have visiting with us the Deputy High Commissioner of the British High Commission, Ms. Sarah Korskaden, if I could pronounce it properly, so we welcome you, and be assured that our debates are as robust as the debates in our court. So welcome to Guyana and to our parliament. Those are the announcements, please.
Presentation of petitions, presentation of papers and reports, etc.
Members, I present to the Assembly the minutes of the proceedings of the 15th meeting of the Committee of Selection, which was held on Wednesday, 30th April 2014. I now call on the Honourable Minister of Labour to make a presentation.
Mr. Speaker, I present to the National Assembly the report of the Sugar Industry Labour Welfare Fund Committee for the year 2012.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I next call on the Honourable Minister of Finance to make his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to present to the Assembly the following documents. Firstly, the audited financial statements of Guyana Securities Council for the year ended 31st December 2013. Audited financial statements of the Guyana Office for Investment for the year ended 31st December 2012. Audited financial statements of the Integrity Commission for the year ended 31st December 2012. Audited financial statements of the Guyana Energy Agency for the year ended 31st December 2010. Audited financial statements of the Guyana Energy Agency for the year ended 31st December 2011. And finally, sir, audited financial statements of the Guyana Energy Agency for the year ended 31st December 2012.
Reports from committees.
Honourable Member Mr. Indrani Chanapal, Chairperson of the Parliamentary Secretarial Committee on Social Services.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to present the 6th periodic report of the Parliamentary Secretarial Committee on Social Services Resolution number 19 of the Commission for the period 16th of March 2012 to 14th of March 2012. Thank you.
Honourable Member, we thank you for your report, and I know that the committee has been venturing out. I wish you would make it as far as you could go to the NOC. But congratulations on your good work. I must say it's been very impressive. I call on the Honourable Member Dr. George Norton, Chairman of the Committee on Appointment.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to present to the National Assembly the second report of the Committee on Appointments in relation to the appointments of members of the Public Service Commission.
Thank you. Honourable Member, much responsibility is placed on your committee, and I know that you are working assiduously to discharge your mandate, as many of our commissions require new members, and I know that you're working on that. Thank you very much for your report. Please proceed, Ms. Clark.
Oral questions without notice. Questions on notice.
Honourable members, there are 15 questions on the order paper, 14 are for written replies, and 1 is for an oral answer. Question number 1 is in the name of the Honourable Member, Mrs. Valerie Gabriela Lowe, and it's the Honourable Minister of Education. Sorry, she's absent today. Question number 2 is in the name of the Honourable Member, Mrs. June Marcello, and it's the Honourable Minister of Education. She too is absent. That question will have to be deferred. Question number 3 is in the name of the Honourable Member, Mr. Christopher Jones, and it's for the Honourable Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport. Questions numbers 4, 5, 6, and 7 are in the name of the Honourable Member, Ms. Annette Ferguson. Question number 4 from that lot is for the Honourable Minister of Health, who is unavoidably absent, travelling on business overseas. Question number 5 is to the Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport. Question number 6 is to the Honourable Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Bishop Edgell. Question number 7 is to the Honourable Minister of Public Works. Question number 8 is in the name of the Honourable Member, Lieutenant Colonel retired Joseph Harmon, and it's to the Minister of Natural Resources and the Environment. Questions numbers 9, 10, and 11 are in the name of the Honourable Member, Mr. Desmond Trotman. Question numbers 9 and 10 are for the Honourable Prime Minister and Minister of Parliamentary Affairs. Question number 11 is to the Honourable Minister of Finance. Questions numbers 12 and 13 are in the name of the Honourable Member, Mrs. Catherine Hughes, and are for the Minister of Finance. Question number 14 is in the name of the Honourable Member, Mr. Vanessa Christina, and she's the Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport. Answers to questions numbers 1 through 9, 10, and 11 have not yet been received, but I'm sure that they are being addressed. Only the answers to questions numbers 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12, 13, and 14 have been received and have been circulated in accordance with our standing orders. Thank you. Honourable members, question number 15 requires an oral reply. I now invite Honourable Member Ms. Vanessa Christina to present the question to the Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could the Honorable Minister of Finance say what criteria were used to select the members of the Linden Enterprise Network Board, LEN? And second, who were the persons responsible for this selection?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Amongst the criteria used to identify the members of the Board of Directors of the Linden Enterprise Network, LEN as it is popularly called, would be the following. First of all, experience and knowledge of the functioning of the precursor programs that were in the Linden Economic Advancement Program and its subsidiary, the Linden Economic Advancement Fund. Secondly, knowledge of Linden and its environs, its business and investment opportunities, and its economic and socio-cultural conditions. Thirdly, Mr. Chairman, the service to the community, availability indeed to be of service to the community, and an attempt to identify persons who will be so available. In relation to was the second part of the question posed to, or?
Yeah.
Okay. In relation to the second part of the question, the input was received by my ministry from my colleagues in the cabinet. The approval of the cabinet was sought, and the appointment made ultimately by my ministry.
Thank you very much. Follow-up. Honorable Minister, then within the selection, there were no persons from within the region on that committee.
Well, I wouldn't be able to say what the basis is for the honourable member's conclusion in that regard. But the board does include a number of persons who are Lindeners and or who have a long
Correct, Mr. Minister, I was talking about the persons responsible for the selection. I'm asking the region. You said your ministry and...
Well, the appointment was made by my ministry ultimately, but like I said, input and recommendations were received from my colleagues in the cabinet, many of whom have, through their respective sectors, a close and intimate involvement and engagement with women.
Mr. Chair, could the Honorable Minister indicate whether the committee has any meetings so far, and if they have, how many, and if not, why not?
I wouldn't be able to say, sir, whether they, how frequently they've been meeting. I will say that the board was formally and publicly launched in Linden at a ceremony in which I participated myself, and my colleague, Minister Etchell, was also in attendance. And there was, in fact, a considerable presence from the Linden business and business community more generally by Lindens.
Could the Honorable Minister say whether the committee conducted any meetings at all? You're not sure if they had one meeting, any meetings? And secondly, the board, is the board accountable to the government or the community of Linden?
Well, Like I said, Mr. Chairman, I won't be able to say how many meetings the board has had since. In terms of accountability, sir, in the strictest sense, the company is, of course, a publicly owned company, meaning a company registered and whose shares are owned by the public sector of Guyana, by the government of Guyana on behalf of the people of Guyana. So the board will have an accountability relationship with the government of Guyana, which they necessarily must. But because of the mandate of the entity, the board will inevitably also have, the entity itself will inevitably have an accountability to the people of Linden. The objectives of the entity are rooted in its activity. The objectives of the entity are inextricably, of course, linked to the activities it will be implementing in Linden. And so I rather suspect that it's inevitable that we will have an accountability to the people of Linden also. But as the board of directors of a registered company that is in the public sector, the board will also have the conventional accountability relationships with the government.
This will be the last-
That's a question, but just to say to the Honorable Minister, based on my knowledge, there has not been any meetings conducted, and I would, appreciate if you can investigate and have those meetings going so that the people from Region 10 can benefit from the land program.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I note the member's comments, and I wish to assure the member and indeed the House and in general the people of Linden, the people of Guyana, that it is this government's desire that the entity should be functioning and implementing its activities in order to achieve the objectives of contributing to the economic health and well-being of Linden. So thank you very much for bringing that to my notice, and you can be assured that I'll be speaking.
Thank you. Please proceed, Mr. Clark.
Statements by ministers, including policy statements.
Honourable members, I've been advised that the Honourable Minister of Human Services and Social Security wishes to make a statement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security, through the National Commission on the Family, wishes to join with the United Nations in observing today, May 15th, as the International Day for Families, as declared by the UN in 1993. Mr. Speaker, for years, the United Nations has designated May 15th as International Day for Families. This year, the theme, which is aptly identified, makes bold that families matter for the achievement of the 8 Millennium Development Goals. Such a bold assertion must not be trivialized or dismissed as impracticable. Indeed, the undeniable fact remains that the family is the very foundation of every human society. The 8 MDGs, Overcoming Poverty and Hunger, MDG 1, MDG 2, Universal Primary Education, MDG 3, Gender Equality, MDG 4, Child Mortality, MDG 5, Maternal Health, MDG 6, Combat HIV, AIDS and Other Diseases, MDG 7, Environmental Sustainability, and MDG 8, Global Partnerships. The National Commission for the Family in Guyana considers the achievement of these goals as a national imperative, but contends and concurs that their achievement is contingent on the deliberate and sustainable strengthening of the family. To achieve MDG 1, Overcoming Poverty and Hunger, requires the active involvement of the family. It is the development and empowerment opportunities provided to local communities, which in turn work towards finding the solutions to their unique problems and challenges that is most effective in overcoming poverty and hunger. It is the empowerment of families through the provision of adequate resources and education that eradicates poverty and sets the socio-economic foundation for future generations. The achievement of universal primary education is one of the MDGs which Guyana can boast of having virtually achieved. The National Commission for the Family believes that the family plays a very critical role in a child's education. The accomplishment of this goal of primary education for every child depends greatly on the partnership amongst parents, families, governments, and educators, working together in support of the family unit and the educational development of our children. While the commitment of government to education delivery is commendable, as evidenced by the significant budgetary allocation to the education sector, nothing is as effective in securing the educational needs of our nation's children like a supportive family environment and parental involvement in the educational well-being of our children. Having a stable and empowering home and family environment is critically necessary for the educational development of children. MDG 3, gender equality, also requires for its achievement the active involvement of the family. Focusing on the family helps us to achieve gender equality and women's empowerment. When we recognize the importance of family for society's survival and well-being, we gain perspective and appreciation for the gender differences and the essential unique capacities women have as mothers and wives. Research repeatedly confirms that a married partnership of complementarity between mothers and fathers is best for women and children. Such a union of reciprocating respect creates the healthiest and happiest marriages. Within such a marriage, women are more likely to fulfill their potential as relationship builders and nurturers as wives and mothers, deeply enriching the whole family. MDG 4 and 5 speak to the reduction of child mortality and maternal health. The primary health care needs of children are first met within the context of the family. The National Commission of the Family advocates that stronger partnerships be built between the family and the neonatal and postnatal health service providers, with a very strong focus on education for families. It is vital that information and education be made available to families through a family-centered approach to reducing child and newborn mortality and morbidity, as well as maternal mortality. MDG 6, the fight against HIV and AIDS, is one which requires the family to be at the very forefront for its success. Those who take family life seriously are our greatest allies in the fight against AIDS. Those voluntary organizations, including religious ones, who teach abstinence and family commitment should be encouraged and not criticized. Moral commitments to family life are fundamental. The National Commission for the Family further recognizes that the vital care and support required for those living with and affected by HIV and AIDS can best be provided by the family. Hence, an appeal is made to families within which there are members affected by this disease, that education be sought as to how to provide the very critical and necessary support needed by those affected. Let me take this opportunity to commend the work of the National AIDS Program Secretariat for the role it has played in the national drive on this issue. The protection, preservation, and sustainability of our environment also depends upon support and active involvement of the family unit. Families are responsible largely for the transmitting of values and morals, which sets the foundation for generations. Some of the basic standards which parents pass on to their children, particularly with regards to respect for the environment, have contributed to a renewed commitment by environmentally conscious individuals to advocate for and champion the cause of ecologically responsible behavior by individuals. It is truly an undeniable fact that the role of the family in a nation is pivotal and fundamental to a nation's health and well-being. Equally important, therefore, would be the contribution of the family to the achievement of the Millennium Development Goals. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I would like to say, family really matters. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister, and I'd like to compliment both yourself and your staff for the production of this excellent magazine, which I believe every member has just received a copy of. Thank you very much for providing us with copies. Please proceed.
Personal explanations. Request for leave to move the adjournment of the National Assembly on definite matters of urgent public importance. Motions relating to the business or sittings of the National Assembly moved by Minister. Introduction of bills, public business, government's business.
Honourable members, we will commence the second reading of the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2014, Bill number 4 of 2014, which was first published on the notice paper on the 29th of January 2014. Honourable Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs to move the motion for the bill to be passed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is a bill of some importance, and it seeks to address two broad issues, and indeed two fundamental issues. Firstly, it seeks to address the difficulties which are invariably encountered in establishing criminal liability where a vehicle that is registered in the name of one person but is in the possession of another and is being used or has been used by that other person in the commission of a criminal offense or engaged in a criminal enterprise. Mr. Speaker, I have no doubt that members of this Honorable House are aware of the multiplicity of stories published in the newspapers regarding crimes being committed with the use of a motor vehicle which is subsequently abandoned. And when the investigations are conducted by the police, those investigations disclose that the vehicles are registered in the name of a particular person, but has been used by another. The person whose name appears on the certificate of registration, having divested himself of physical possession and use of that motor vehicle by the instrumentality of power of attorney, of a hire purchase agreement, agreements of sale, and such other devices, thereby putting the investigation in a very difficult state in terms of proceeding forward, because on most occasions it is indeed the fact that the name, that the person's name which appears on the registration really has in fact parted use and possession with that vehicle for some considerable time prior to the impugned act which is the subject of the investigation. As a result of that technicality, many investigations have had to come to an abrupt end, and many persons who ordinarily would have attracted criminal liability escape that liability, and there is no document, there is no basis for the police to even document in their record what role, if any, the person who last had use and possession of the vehicle played in relation to any criminal investigation, any criminal enterprise rather.
And this bill, Mr. Speaker, seeks to address that issue and the many attendant and resultant issues that arise in relation to Sorry about that, Mr. Speaker. It's not my fault. I don't know what caused that. This bill seeks to address the many consequential problems that arise as a result of that lacuna, if one may call it so, in the Road Traffic and the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act. Mr. Speaker, to appreciate the nature of this amendment, perhaps it is important that I consult and read, for the benefit of members, the current definition of owner as it is contained in the definition section of the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act. Owner is defined in section 2 of the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 51:02, as follows. Owner means the person in whose name a motor vehicle or a trailer is registered, and in the absence from Guyana of the registered owner, the person in actual charge or possession of the vehicle, and in relation to a vehicle which is the subject of a hiring agreement or a hire purchase agreement, the person in possession of the vehicle under that agreement. So this definition of owner, and I will explain, I'm going to detail at some point as I proceed. This definition of owner, Your Honor, is a fictional one in law and has been inserted a very long time ago. The Road Traffic Act, in its current formulation, the substantive, the principal act, was enacted in 1940. So since then, legislators have created in the Road Traffic Act, for the purpose of defining who is an owner, they have created a fiction by making the persons whose name appear on the certificate of registration as the owner, as well as a person who may have use or possession of the vehicle under a hire purchase agreement. I say fiction because under the law of hire purchase, as Your Honor would appreciate, but for the benefit of the non-lawyers in this House, a hire purchase agreement does not confer title until the last installment is paid. Property in the chattel, which is the subject of the hire, remains in the owner during the currency of the hire until the last installment is paid, and then the option to purchase is exercised. So the owner, for example, the person who sells a motor car on hire purchase, or hire that motor car by way of a hire purchase agreement to another person, that auto dealer remains the owner in law. The property in that chattel resides with that auto dealer. But under the Road Traffic Act, there is a fiction, because the Road Traffic Act confers upon the person in possession the title of ownership, at least in the Act, for the purpose of imposing liability. And I wish to respectfully submit, sir, that this applies not only under the Road Traffic Act, but under several pieces of legislation. And if I may conclude that point by pointing to the way in which our courts in the past have interpreted that very section, I want to draw attention respectfully, sir, with your kind permission, to two cases. And I'm going into some depth, sir, because of reservations which have been raised by some members on the other side. And I would like to allay whatever concerns they may have. That I'm not changing, this bill does not seek to change the civil law in relation to who owns a vehicle. A hire purchase law remains intact. The law in relation to bills of sale remains intact. The law in relation to power of attorney remains intact. But for the purpose of convenience and for the purpose of discharging liabilities, or rather imposing liabilities under the Road Traffic Act and various pieces of legislation, criminal liability, they have expanded artificially the concept of owner. The Act, our Road Traffic Act, Your Honor, was interpreted in a local case, 1950, Bhoop Singh against David, reported at 1950, Law Reports of British Guyana, at page 38, where then Justice Ward said this at page 38. The effect of this provision in the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Ordinance, at that time the Act was an ordinance, is not to establish real ownership of the vehicle, but to make the registered owner liable for any delicts under the ordinance or for any wrongs for which the owner would be liable in damages. So it's only for liability. Another case in which this issue was visited was a case that is reported under the rubric of Central Garage Limited against S.M. Hassan, 1967, Guyana Law Reports, page 18, where Justice Van Sertima held that ownership for the purpose of registration under the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act is not necessarily the same as de facto or de jure ownership for the purpose of ownership of property. So, Your Honor, I just want to allay whatever apprehensions may exist in relation to any feeling that this amendment or these sets of amendments are intended to interfere with the substantive law. It is not intended to do so. In fact, all this amendment does, in terms of expanding the definition of owner, is to include two other categories of ownership. Recall, I read the substantive act, and it says that owner means the person in whose name a motor vehicle or trailer is registered. In absence from Guyana, the registered owner, the person in actual possession or actual charge of the vehicle. So when a person is outside of Guyana, he who is left in charge of that vehicle or in possession of that vehicle is treated as the owner under the legislation. And thirdly, in relation to a vehicle which is the subject of a hiring agreement, a hire purchase agreement or a sales agreement, the person in possession of the vehicle under that agreement. That is the substantive law as it now stands. This bill now seeks to add two additional categories. Firstly, in relation to a vehicle which is the subject of a bill of sale, the person in possession of the vehicle under the bill of sale. And in relation to a motor vehicle that is the subject of a power of attorney, the donee of the power of attorney having possession of the vehicle. Mr. Speaker, this expansion was done in recognition of the abundant use which is made in Guyana of bill of sales. There are certain auto dealers who prefer to use the commercial device of a bill of sale as opposed to a hire purchase agreement. They are different commercial instruments which carry with them different procedure and different benefits in order to secure indebtedness whenever they sell vehicles on credit, because these are credit instruments which are designed to secure indebtedness. So some persons use a credit agreement, a bill of sale agreement, and in the current construct of the law as it stands in the substantive, in the Principal Act, owner is not catered for or is not provided for in relation to bills of sale. So when, for example, a person buys a vehicle and a bill of sale is executed to secure payment for that chattel or that vehicle, that under the terms of the bill of sale, possession is granted to the debtor. However, the law in its current construct does not make that person the owner in the same fashion that had he purchased it under a hire purchase agreement, the law would have defined him as an owner. And that is all that this bill seeks to do in relation to that. In relation to power of attorney, of course, that's an instrument that is popularly used both when persons are in Guyana as well as outside of Guyana. They would, as they deem convenient, execute a power of attorney, in essence assigning away from themselves possession of the vehicle to a third person. This bill now makes that third person an owner, as if he were the registered owner. So that is simply what the bill seeks to do. And it's to curb, as I said, the issue of persons not being able, police in particular, not being able to associate for the purpose of liability persons whose names do not appear on the registration. Mr. Speaker, Clause 3 of the bill simply provides that when there is a change of possession by virtue of any of the instrumentality to which I have made reference, when there is a change of possession, then the certificate of registration must be transferred rather, to reflect such a change of possession within 7 days. And the other amendments in relation thereto are simply consequential. The ordinary requirement to obtain compliance from the Inland Revenue Department, etc., are all outlined there for the purpose of completeness. But significantly, it makes it an offense if this transfer is not done. Importantly, Mr. Speaker, it provides for also where the registered owner is out of the country and wants to effect the transfer, then that can be done, but that person who is seeking to effect the transfer on behalf of the registered owner will be required under the amendment to provide an affidavit sworn to by the person whose name appears in the registration if that person is out of the country. The need and the rationale for such a requirement, I believe, is patent and evident and requires no explanation. Mr. Speaker, the other important aspect of this part of the amendment is the fact that it does not, the bill expressly provides that the fact that there is going to be a new name on the registration does not affect and is indeed subject to the terms and conditions of any agreement that may involve the vehicle or the chattel in relation to rights, powers, limit liabilities, etc. And of course, it is subject to whatever conditionalities are imposed in the agreement, so that this amendment cannot be used as an instrument by a person to defeat their contractual obligations. In other words, a person can't hold up the certificate of registration with their name appearing on it as a basis to deny their indebtedness or to deny their existence as a hirer and not the owner under a hire purchase agreement. And of course that can apply in relation to a bill of sale as well. So all the safety mechanisms have been injected in this bill to ensure that there is no consequential difficulties when it is being implemented. Mr. Speaker, as I said at the commencement, that this bill deals with two broad issues. That is the first one. The second one, Mr. Speaker, is that the bill seeks to address, or rather introduce or promulgate for the first time into the legislative architecture of Guyana the demerit point system, which essentially is a system of sanction against errant drivers of motor vehicles. This is a system which has been employed in many jurisdictions with reported success. Mr. Speaker, I don't think anyone can dispute that we have an unusually high incidence of vehicular accidents, vehicular collision on our roadways. I don't think that anyone can dispute seriously that we have an unusually high incidence or rate of road fatality in our country. And when one looks at the figures, the fatalities range from children way up to adults, onto senior citizens. No category of citizens seem to be exempt from the carnage which take place with alarming frequency on our roadways. I distinctly recall when I sat on the Disciplined Forces Commission alongside the distinguished leader of the opposition. He made a significant contribution to that commission under the rubric of public safety, in which he wrote at length about the importance of creating an environment that is safe for all of our people. And creating an environment that is safe and putting public safety on our national agenda is indeed important, and it is obviously multifaceted. Safety on our roads obviously is an important part of that whole regime of creating a safe environment. I recall also sitting on the National Commission for Law and Order, chaired by my colleague, the Honorable Minister of Home Affairs. And in that committee, the opposition, at least the major opposition as far as I can recall, has representation. I recall sitting a number of years opposite the Honorable Ms. Deborah Baca and Abiola Inis, attorney at law, representing the then PNC, People's National Congress. And we had various outreaches and interactions with the public, physically as well as via the media. And the views have always been expressed by members of the public that we should introduce the demerit point system in our legislation. Well, this bill seeks to introduce that, and in my humble view, Mr. Speaker, it is a measure that is long overdue. Mr. Speaker, I would respectfully like to direct attention of members to the schedule. It's described as the third schedule in the bill. And in this schedule, there are 3 columns. Column 1 lists the number of offenses to which the system will apply. Column 2 identifies the various provisions of the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act that are connected to the offense, which are outlined in column 1. And column 3 attributes points to each offense stated in column 1. Obviously, the points are not going to be the same, and they vary in terms of their number in accordance with and commensurate with the magnitude and gravity of the offense. So clearly, the number of points that one will get for driving an unregistered motor vehicle will be far lower than the points one will get for causing death by dangerous driving. So, significant to the demerit system and the bill itself is the third schedule, which outlines how the system essentially is intended to operate, and then the bill deals with, in writing, what the statistical information is that is contained in the schedule. And that is all that the rest of the bill speaks to. And it's difficult to explain rather than go through it, it's difficult to explain other than by going through it clause by clause. So I will go through clause 4. This introduces a person who is convicted for any offense specified in the third schedule. The court shall, in addition to any punishment for that offense, order that the demerit points specified in the third schedule in relation to that offense be recorded against the driver's license of that person. And if sufficient demerit points are recorded, the person shall be disqualified for a period, etc., etc. So this section allows the court, rather confers upon the court an additional punitive power apart from the power to impose a sanction for the offense which is in accordance with the law already. The court now has an additional punitive power to award points based upon the third schedule, and those points have to be recorded on the driver's license. And when they reach a particular limit, there are another regime of consequences that will flow, which includes, but is not limited to, disqualification for a period, and perhaps disqualification permanently, depending, of course, on how many repeated offenses are committed. Where a person then sets out the appeal process, where a person appeals against a conviction for an offense relating to subsection 1, no demerits shall be recorded in respect of that conviction unless the conviction is confirmed on appeal. So the demerit is only applied when there is a conviction. If an appeal is filed, the demerit system is not applied until that appeal is ventilated, presumably to the entire hierarchical structure of the judiciary, and until it reaches the apex. And then, if the conviction still stands and is not overturned in the appellate process, then the demerit system will apply. Then it deals with where the person is convicted of an offence specified in the third schedule, the clerk of the court shall inform the licensing authority of the conviction, and then the procedure begins how the conviction is going to be recorded, so that at all the relevant agencies, including the licensing office, there would be a mass of consistent information regarding a driver.